Welcome everybody to University of Illinois Extension's local government education platform. We're happy to host the Illinois Broadband Lab today. Shubhika Agarwal is our presenter, and she will be covering the FCC National Broadband Map and participating in the FCC challenge process. She is also working with the state of Illinois Office of Broadband, and we're just happy to have you here to assist folks on how to do these challenges and provide information about this process and what it's going to do for everybody. So really appreciate you being here, and I will go ahead and pass the mic to you, Shubhika. Thank you all for joining.
Sure. Thank you so much, Nancy. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. So as Nancy mentioned, we're going to be discussing the FCC broadband maps and how you can actually participate in the challenge process that the FCC has opened for consumers, local governments, counties, and just how anybody can participate in the process. Let's get started. This might be a recap for some of you who have attended past webinars on the FCC challenge, but we're really going to skim through the challenge process, the need for it, and all of that. And towards the end, also share, some ways counties and local governments in the state have been participating in the process, just like help some of us who might be starting out or just learning about the process. So that's what today's webinar is pretty much going to look like. So again, a historic opportunity to make huge strides in closing the digital divide. And we need help from consumers, local governments, counties, and everybody who uses the internet, so all of us. In today's webinar, we're going to be talking about the steps that Illinois residents can follow to make sure that the new maps released by the FCC are accurate. An accurate map is going to result in more funding for the state and a better and targeted investment moving forward through the BEAD programming. That's been put forward by NTIA. So how can we help? Visit the FCC or Illinois Office of Broadband website, evaluate the maps, and file challenges if you find any inaccuracies there. So just to go through the structure of today's presentation, we're initially going to be starting with what is the FCC fabric, what are the new maps, a brief summary of what the maps tell us about Illinois, the FCC challenge timeline. Then we'll go through the 3 different types of challenges: the fixed availability challenge, the fabric or location challenge, the mobile service coverage challenge, various resources available through the state, FCC, and a few others. Towards the end, we'll be sharing examples of how communities in Illinois have been engaging, and we'll be ending it with next steps on how to prepare and participate in the challenge process. So firstly, we have the broadband serviceable locations fabric. So this is, all locations in the US where fixed broadband internet is available or can be installed. So that is referred to as a broadband serviceable location and is a part of the fabric. This also includes gray location points that represents structures or buildings that would likely subscribe to enterprise or commercial grade service and not the mass market options available. And this would usually be government buildings, schools, hospitals, libraries, and some of those different community anchor organizations. Then we have the FCC National Broadband Map, which is basically an overlay of the availability data onto the broadband serviceable locations fabric. The objective is to know where broadband service is and is not available. And the information that it provides is basically for each and every address location in the country, what are the different internet service providers that provide location, the type of service they provide. So that's the technology, fiber, cable, DSL, satellite, or fixed wireless, and the maximum upload and download speeds that they have advertised for these locations. A brief summary of what these maps say about Illinois. So these maps that were released on November 18th, 2022, they report that 5% of locations in Illinois are unserved, 28% underserved, and 68% served. And we have like a total of 4,131K locations in Illinois. So firstly, just to level set, unserved is basically all locations that have less than 25/3 wired and fixed wireless, licensed fixed wireless services. Those would be considered unserved. The ones with the same kind of technology, but with speeds between 25/3 and 100/20 would be considered underserved. And then we have the served, which have more than 100/20 speeds. So we see that a large chunk of locations in Illinois are underserved. We know that funding is going to be dependent mostly on the unserved locations. So we're going to make sure that, what is reported as underserved in the maps right now is in fact not unserved. And so we want everybody to be taking a look at these maps and making sure that the information that's reported for each of these locations is accurate. And again, we get the funding that is appropriate and helps with a targeted investment in the years to come. So a timeline, the maps were released on November 18, 2022, and we have until January 13th, 2023 to challenge these maps. It is until this date that challenges will be considered for the BEAD allocations. And the updated broadband availability map will then be used for the funding allocations. So we want to make sure that we can submit as many challenges to the map before the January 13th deadline, so that again, Illinois is well positioned to bridge the digital divide in Illinois and bring the infrastructure that all of these places need. We're going to start with the different kinds of challenges now. So firstly, discussing the fixed availability challenge process. This is mostly focused on individual consumers would want to check what availability looks like in their area, what providers have reported, and also for organizations that might want to help these individuals look that up, because we want to be reaching out to these locations that do not have access to the good internet. So definitely collaborating with these local community anchor institutions to make sure that everybody in the state has the resources to log on and look up the map, look up their address and make sure that the data on there is accurate. So when does one really file an availability challenge? So the FCC has laid down 9 different categories for when one can file an availability challenge. And just to make it easier, we have, created 3 buckets that kind of cover all of these. The first one being reported service or speed is not available for purchase at that location. In case of fixed wireless or satellite, if the signal is not available at that location, that would also qualify for an availability challenge. And then we have, all of those different categories that would fall into this. Then we have denied service or demanded connection charges that exceed the standard installation charges. This would also be considered an acceptable reason for an availability challenge. And finally, fail to schedule or perform installation within 10 days of request. And again, FCC does not require evidence, but that is something that would be appreciated and just would increase the chances of a challenge being successful. In this slide here, we talk about how to file an availability challenge. So firstly, visiting the map, which is at broadbandmap.fcc.gov. It shows up with a home screen where you get enter your address in the search bar. And then what we recommend is going on to the settings logo and selecting all wired and licensed fixed wireless technology, because that is what is going to be considered for purposes of determining whether a location is served, underserved, or unserved for funding purposes. So yeah, selecting that, and that is what is going to guide what your address shows up as, served or unserved, and then looking up the provider information and filing a challenge. So I'm going to quickly load this short video by FCC that walks us through the process. And just want to make sure if you see my YouTube screen with the audio.
The FCC has a new map
So Nancy, can you confirm if you see my screen and if the audio is good with the video?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Showing where internet service is and is not available across the country. We need your help to ensure the information on the map about the internet services available to your home or small business is accurate. On your mobile device, go to broadbandmap.fcc.gov. Type your address in the search bar and select the best match from the list that displays. Your location will appear as a point on the map, along with information about internet services offered at the location below the map. Red locations indicate that no internet services are reported for that location. If one of the services listed is not actually offered to the selected location, you can select the Availability Challenge link. This will bring up a form where you can first select the provider to challenge. Scroll down and complete the form, selecting the reason for your challenge from the drop-down list. Options include the reported service is not available, or the provider is requesting more than a standard installation fee to get you connected. You can upload files like emails or screenshots to support your challenge, or you can write a description of your experience in the form. Be sure to check the certification box at the bottom of the form and then select Submit to submit your challenge. With your help, the map will be more accurate, and an accurate map is an important tool for expanding internet services to all Americans. broadbandmap.fcc.gov.
So that little video quickly runs through the process of, the challenge, it's pretty quick. And again, a good internet connection is what we're looking for. We've been hearing that people have had trouble logging on to the map just because they did not have a good internet connection. And so filing a challenge was difficult for them. So again, just making the point that utilizing your local libraries and other community anchor institutions to help with the process can be really helpful for residents to, take a look at the map and also file challenges if they need to. So what do I expect after filing an availability challenge? So it's going to go through an initial FCC review where they're going to ensure that it's not a complaint about quality of service or billing issues. A lot of times, consumers have reported issues around speed and reliability. That would not be considered a valid challenge for, this availability challenge by the FCC. That would rather be considered a crowdsourced data complaint. So they just want to make sure that's not that. They want to make sure that it's the right reason for the challenge and sufficient evidence has been submitted. If not, an attachment, just a good description of why you've made the challenge. After the initial review, there's going to be an email notification to the provider as well as to the consumer who's filed the complaint, and it's going to include all the information about the challenge. Then the provider is going to have 60 days to review this information, with the consumer who's filed the complaint and work it out. If that doesn't happen, the FCC is going to have 90 days to review any unresolved challenges, and then they're going to make a final decision on whether they have accepted or denied that challenge. And based on that, it's going to be reflected on the map eventually. The consumer who's filed the challenge can also look up the status of the challenge by visiting that particular location. And it's going to show if, the status of that challenge is pending, accepted, or rejected. So any of these possibilities. Moving on to the FCC Fabric or location challenge process. So this is again for individual consumers who might look up their address and, it's probably not reported the right way. So this is meant for them and again for organizations who might want to help these individuals. So when would one submit a location challenge? So when we first go onto the map and type on our address, if the resulting screen shows no location data available, this would mean that the address is missing from the fabric and would qualify for a location challenge. The second one could be that the address shows up as a gray point. So as I'd mentioned earlier, the fabric has these points which they've identified to subscribe to enterprise or commercial grade service. And if that's not really the case, then you can file a challenge which would be under the misidentified location category. So that shouldn't really be a gray point because it subscribes to a mass internet service option. And then if the corresponding unit count or building type is incorrect, then based on the incorrect information category. And finally, if the address shows up on a wrong location on the map, it can be challenged under the incorrect placement on the map category. So again, a similar process going on to the FCC map, entering the address into the search bar. And if we had any of the 4 issues that I mentioned earlier, this is when the consumer would file a fabric challenge. And again, there's a short, quick video that runs through this pretty efficiently. So I'm going to go on to that.
The FCC has a new map showing where internet service is and is not available across the country. We need your help to ensure your home or small business is included accurately on the map. On your mobile device, go to broadbandmap.fcc.gov. Type your address or town in the search bar and select the best match from the list that displays. The address or location you entered will then appear as a point on the map, and the information about the internet services offered at the location will appear below the map. Red locations indicate that no internet services are reported for that location. If you think that any information about the location itself on the map is incorrect, like an address or misidentification of which building on a property is the home, select the Location Challenge link near the address information that is below the map. Enter the required information. Check the certification box at the bottom of the form and select Submit. If your location is missing from the map, select the point on the map where your home or business is located, then select Location Challenge and complete the form. An accurate map is an important tool for expanding internet services to all Americans. broadbandmap.fcc.gov.
Yep, so that was a quick overview of the process to file a location challenge. And one suggestion that we make right here is if your address was not on the fabric, then with the location challenge in the description, you may also include what existing broadband services look like at your location, because because your address wasn't there, they don't have the availability information on there. So just providing that might be like an extra step, and might help FCC get that information for the next round. Then we have the mobile service coverage challenge. So this is again for consumers who are dependent on mobile service for getting connected to the internet. This is not a focus and is not going to drive funding, but again, we just want to make sure that people are aware of this, because we realize that a lot of people across Illinois are reliant on cellular service for internet. So just making sure that this information is out there as well. So if the information reported on the FCC map for mobile coverage does not match your experience, that is when you can take this test. This is going to be through the FCC speed test app. So the consumer will have to download this app on their cell phone. There's a link to download it through the App Store right here. And then there's also like a similar short video on how to file a mobile service coverage challenge. So how to go through the app and all the steps. One note with this is that it requires the test to be taken outdoors or in a vehicle. That is, any indoor tests will not be accepted. And the time for the test between 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. These results will be analyzed and aggregated each month to determine whether there's a pattern. And after a certain threshold, it's going to be sent out to the provider for their response. And there's a link to the video here. And I think we'll just go ahead and play it so that we have a sense of what the process looks like.
Results directly to the FCC. The FCC's mobile speed test app now allows users to submit mobile speed test results directly to the FCC to dispute or challenge the coverage and speeds reported by mobile providers on the National Broadband Map. Here's how to use the FCC Speed Test app to submit a challenge speed test. First, download the free FCC Speed Test app from your App Store and follow the prompts to install the app. Open the app, enter the required information, and tap the Challenge Speed Test button. If you have not previously done so, you will need to enter your first name, last name, and email address. You will also need to provide the phone number of the mobile device. If you want more information about how your data will be stored, used, and protected, tap the Privacy Policy link. To continue with the mobile challenge, check the certification box and tap the Save and Continue button. You'll be prompted to confirm two things. One, that your mobile data is turned on with no restrictions set for the connection type and airplane mode is off. And two, that you are the subscriber or authorized user of the provider being challenged and that the speed test app is working normally. Tap to check both boxes and click Continue. Select the outdoor pedestrian/stationary or the in-vehicle mobile option, depending on where you are, and tap Continue. Note that challenge speed tests should not be conducted indoors. On the next screen, tap Start Test and wait while the test runs. The test results will display on your screen. Tap Finish to submit the test results to the FCC. You can tap Test Again to submit another test. For more information on how these test results will be aggregated to challenge mobile coverage, tap the Settings gear at the bottom right of the screen, then select About in the menu options. If your speed test results contribute to a challenge that is sent to a provider, you will receive email updates on its status. These speed test results will help improve the map and ensure funding for 5G networks is directed to areas that need it most.
So that was the process for the mobile service challenge. Now a few resources. So the Illinois Office of Broadband has put together a bunch of resources on their website. And let's just quickly go to the website so that we can see some of them. So it's under the FCC National Broadband Map Challenge tab right here. And we've broken down the resources for residents and separately for partnering organizations. And there's a pretty good FAQ document that we have right here, which talks about what the challenge is, the need, when can one file a challenge, the process. There are links to, some of the videos that we saw earlier today. And a lot of times I've been asked what counties or organizations that have done speed tests in the past can do with that data. So unfortunately, that is not considered a valid evidence for the FCC fixed availability challenge. But you can submit a complaint through the FCC's customer complaint center. And otherwise, there's also an option while submitting an availability challenge that this is not a challenge, but in fact, just information about the service that's being provided. So that's another way of filing a complaint with the FCC. And then again, if there is information, if you're a local government organization and you have information about the existing broadband infrastructure or have information from consumers that can be used for the availability challenge, then you can register with the FCC, get an FCC registration number, which is also referred to as the FRN, and submit challenges, bulk challenges on behalf of your constituents or members. So if you need more information on that, then definitely reach out to us and we can help you set that up so that you can make those challenges on behalf of your community members. Then again, there are a few resources out here that can be helpful. So that's about the FAQ document on there. Now let's quickly review resources that we have for residents and for partnering organizations. So it goes through the process again, and we've also created a survey here, which pretty much asks for the same information that's asked on the FCC map. But if a consumer is not comfortable providing that information through the FCC map, they can share it right here using this form with the state. And we are working towards incorporating that into the bulk challenge that we are preparing for. So that is one of the resources that we have out here for individual consumers. Then we have a detailed step-by-step guide to filing challenges. This essentially has screenshots of the entire process. So in addition to the video that we've seen, this can be helpful. This can also be utilized by libraries and other organizations that might be helping out, so that they can just walk the consumer through the process and help them with just filing a challenge. So this is again an important resource here. We again have links to some of these videos that we saw earlier, and again a link to the survey. Moving on to resources for partnering organizations. So here we have a challenge toolkit that we've set up, a template email that can be used to share information about the challenge with community members. Again, the detailed step-by-step guide to help with the process, with the screenshots of the process, the different FCC videos, and then we also have a bunch of flyers that can be shared on social media or just utilized at community centers or other places to share about the challenge process. And then again, information on getting the FRN. So there's some preliminary information here, but if you are interested in this option and wanting to submit a bulk challenge for your community, then definitely reach out to us at broadband@illinois.gov, and we can help you set it up and file a bulk challenge on behalf of your community. So those are some of the resources that the state has put together. FCC also has put together a National Broadband Map outreach toolkit, which includes posters, flyers. There's also audios that can be used for public service announcements. And they also have template social media posts and flyers that can be utilized. as a link to that right here. Then we have the FCC challenge video resources, a link to that right here. And the Institute for Local Self-Reliance has put together a really good resource on how to submit challenges. So it's like a clickable guide that works through, if this is what you're experiencing, then this is the next step. So a pretty user-friendly sort of guide that can be really helpful. One other resource, so we have the Illinois Broadband Connections newsletter that goes out every 2 weeks. So that is, again, a good avenue just to keep updated on whatever is happening around the challenge and just generally around broadband in Illinois. So a link to subscribe to that right here. Now moving on to what communities and counties in Illinois have been doing, and this is based on the outreach that we have been doing and information that we have received from some of the counties and communities in Illinois on how they're helping with outreach efforts. So in case of Whiteside County, they've issued their press release on the challenge. They've shared it with the economic development partners for additional distribution. And they've reported that they're also working with their local cooperative, Joe Carroll Energy, to prepare for a bulk challenge. Then we have example of Knox County. So they're getting this word out about the FCC challenge process to a variety of media. They've also utilized their local GIS department to review the fabric data and just identify any missing or wrong locations on the map. Then we have Bond County. They had partnered with us through the Accelerate Broadband Infrastructure Planning Program. And as part of that, they had conducted a survey. So they utilized that data to just challenge some of the data that was showing up on the FCC maps. And they've been utilizing the survey that I had earlier shared, that is on the Illinois Office of Broadband website, to share some of that information with us, some of those findings, so that we can, just work a little bit with them and make sure that, they're in a place to have those included in the state's bulk challenge. So these are some of the ways that counties have been participating. And again, if you're a county who's doing something different and we're not aware of it, let us know so that, we can again share it with others out there. And if there's anything that's working out for you, any different ways you're spreading the word, we would definitely like to hear more about that. Then we have a few local governments and state department examples here. So in McKinley Park in the Chicago area, they're utilizing their neighborhood news forums. Then we have the Latinx TLN organization working in Summit, Illinois, that also worked in this particular village as part of the Illinois Connected Communities program. So they're using their local library to again spread information. So the library's Facebook page and other outreach resources that they use to share about the FCC challenge process. They're also involving their school district superintendents for assistance with the outreach and just helping out with the process. We then have the city of Chicago. So they hosted a webinar for their Chicago Digital Equity Council members. And again, this was to share about the FCC mapping challenge. And out of that session, they identified that, they can actually host planning sessions in different parts in the city and communities for educating seniors on how to submit challenges, because again, a lot of issues around skills and just access to resources to be able to look up the map and look at the information that's on there. So having some of those digital literacy sessions for seniors and making those resources available so that they have access to the map and the information on there. And then we have the Illinois Department of Human Services. So their division of rehab services. We've had staff from this organization. They've been spreading the word within their communities and the residents that they serve. So again, a really good example and for how, you can think of how your networks can be utilized for outreach about the process, because a lot of availability to internet has to do with economic development and things. So we can always find a correlation there. And one thing that we want to make sure is this is the first step in building these relationships as part of the BEAD program. And also the Digital Equity Act, the state is supposed to be preparing a 5-year plan just to make sure that the resources are reaching the people who need it most within the state. So as we work through that plan, we definitely want to be hearing from, communities, from all of you. So just building those relations first through this mapping process here. And these are just a few examples. Again, if you're doing something different and we haven't heard of it, definitely share that with us so that we can try and scale that up and help with a more efficient outreach and a more efficient challenge process within the state. So now just to summarize next steps on how to prepare and participate in the challenge process. So if you're a local government or an organization that's interested in filing bulk challenges, then definitely start with exploring data sets that can be helpful. As I'd mentioned, if you have data on existing broadband infrastructure or any data that you've collected from consumers in the past that can be utilized for the availability or location challenge, then reach out to us at broadband@illinois.gov, and we can work together to make sure that we can try and incorporate that in the state's bulk challenge, or we can also get you registered with the FCC so that you can make that submission on your behalf. Then partner with local schools, libraries, and community-based organizations, again, just to make the resources available and spread the word. Utilize local resources, so like newsletters, print media, social media, all of those different communication channels that you might already have set up, and prioritize areas that have limited access to broadband and might be dependent only on copper or fixed wireless services, because those are mostly where there's overstatement in service. So that could be a good strategy when you think of how to prioritize outreach. If you're a community-based organization or library that is wanting to help consumers with the process, so then look out for these resources. As Nancy mentioned, we're going to be sharing these slides and a recording to the webinar, so that can be helpful. And then we have a bunch of those resources that I'd shared earlier that can be really helpful in training your own staff and just making sure that consumers who'd want to use your assistance actually get that. Help spread the word among your networks and make library resources available if that's a possibility. And finally, for consumers, visit the map. If your address is not accurately represented, file a location or fabric challenge. If there are inaccuracies in the availability data, so the different service plans that are reported by ISPs, then you can file an availability challenge and just share the word with your family and friends and get them to participate in the process. And finally, an update on the state's bulk fixed availability challenge. So the methodology that we are using is basically divided into 3 different ways we're doing this. The first one is the field validation. So this is where we're prioritizing locations where, service is reported to FCC, but that does not match with what was reported to us through ISPs for the state broadband map. That is where we prioritized field validation. Then we're also working on the availability challenge through the desktop research. So this is where we're targeting underserved locations with only one provider. And again, based on the state broadband mapping data, we kind of think that that might not be accurate. So just making sure that, again, selected locations only with one provider, so that if it turns out that the provider's reported service at these locations does not actually provide service, that would turn this location directly into an unserved location and would result in more funding for the state. So that's a strategy behind our selection for locations for the desktop research. And finally, the crowdsourced challenges through the survey form that I had initially shared through the Illinois Office of Broadband website. So that's how we are going about this. And again, looking forward to collaborate with counties, local governments, with any information that you might have on this, utilize a survey, and just reach out to us if you have any questions, need assistance. It's broadband@illinois.gov. And that's pretty much the information that we have for all of you today. And we are now open for questions.
Thanks, Shubhika. Before we get into some of those questions that folks might have, or even just comments about sort of the nuances they're facing that Shubhika might be able to provide guidance on, I wanted to see if there is a way for you to possibly demonstrate some of those frequent flyer types of cases, or maybe go into a little bit of a description for folks on, let's say this is happening, or let's say that's happening, and what would you do about it? And so maybe to provide a little bit of that on several levels. One could be, you've got a county official or a community leader that knows that they would like to submit a challenge, a batch challenge, for example, or some type of challenge for a cluster that they know has unserved or underserved situations, or situations where they don't have access at all in their county. And so how would you go about it at that sort of batch level or community county level? How would you go about organizing? How would you go about most efficiently getting the challenge process done? And then the other, way you could do it is maybe give us a few examples of some of those individual barriers you're seeing and how that person might be able to submit the best type of information appropriately. And while you're doing that, Shubhika, I've given you a big assignment here, but while you're doing that, then of course I want to encourage folks to put questions and comments into the chat. And thanks, Shubhika, for kind of diving into this a little bit more.
Sure, thank you, Nancy. So what I'm gonna do here quickly is just log on to the map. And again, as I've mentioned, it is an internet availability challenge and it requires internet. So there's a little bit of irony there. But we've been receiving a little bit of complaints on how people are not able to load the map. So again, what we are recommending is utilizing those local library networks, because that is where people can easily get access to the internet, to a system to look up the map. So that would be the best way to reach out to people who do not have access to internet. So just making sure that they're aware of the process and they're aware that their local library would be the place where they could, get the assistance they need. So that would be the first step. And then, with the process, I think it's fairly simple as we've seen in the videos. So just looking up an address, I'm randomly trying to look one up. So you type in your address, it's going to show you a bunch of different ones that kind of match yours. Select the one that is closely matches to your address, and then it takes you to that location on the map. Then, as we mentioned, go on to this settings gear here and select all wired and licensed fixed wireless technology. And the speed's going to be greater than or equal to 25/3. So that's going to guide whether your location is served or not. So in this case, the location that we've selected, that is served. So when the first thing we do here is we want to make sure that the marker shows up on the right location on the map, the information about the building type. So this is residential, and it has reported a unit count of 3. Make sure that is accurate. If not, then you'd file a location challenge. So again, this would require that the consumer input their name, email, the phone number is optional, and they require the email just so that they can get in touch with you in case they have any questions or need to follow up with any kind of information. Then there are the different reasons that we initially mentioned about when one can file a location challenge. Again, the description and evidence are optional, but just to make sure that the challenge is accepted, we recommend that the consumer gives a good description. In case of a location challenge, it could be in the evidence, like a picture of the place, or maybe a Google Maps screenshot that this location exists or something like that, just to make sure that there is a higher possibility of the challenge being accepted. And after all of that is done, just, read through all of this information, certify, and submit. So that is what the location challenge would look like. If all of that information that we mentioned, so like the location on the map, all of this information right here, if that is all accurate, then we move on to looking at the provider information. So there's the name of the provider, the technology that they provide, the maximum upload and download speeds. And towards the end, we also have the challenge column here. So if a challenge has been filed for a particular provider for these speeds, then it's going to show up here. And as I've mentioned, you can also check the status of the challenge if there were one through this column right here. So again, what we would do if we were to file an availability challenge, then select this. There's an option. So if you were to challenge multiple providers, you would have to select, go through this process multiple times. So firstly, if just for example, if I want to challenge AT&T, then I would select that provider, and then so send my challenge to the selected provider. This is when you want to file a challenge. And if your issue is more around speed and reliability, unfortunately, FCC is not accepting that as an availability challenge, but nonetheless, that is, a very common issue, and we want to make sure that FCC has that information as well. So in that case, we recommend that you select this second option, which is I'm giving feedback about the information above and not submitting a challenge. So that is, if you have concerns around speed and reliability, this would be a good option. And similarly, this would require your name, email address, describing your experience, really making sure that you have all the information here, and upload any evidence. So this could be any email communication with the provider, any screenshots from the provider website, or just any marketing material that the provider has out there, which would help validate your claim. So again, optional, but if this is included, this makes your challenge stronger and a higher possibility of it getting accepted. So that, and then there's, after we fill out all of this information, there's again going to be a certification. And after we do that, we can make a submission. So that is pretty much the process. And if we have any questions at this point. And again, it's the fixed, all wired and licensed fixed wireless that's going to guide funding. So a lot of these places that depend on satellite, definitely, if that's not the service that you're receiving, file a challenge. But we'd want folks to also focus on the wired and licensed fixed wireless technologies, just to make sure that information is right, again, because that's going to be guiding the funding that's coming in. So I hope I got to a few of the questions that you raised, Nancy.
Yeah, I do think that's good, because I think all of that is really important to keep in mind, and then folks aren't getting distracted with maybe the parts that don't matter as much. I remember the other day, Matt was mentioning that, even if you see satellite, for example, as available in your area, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to consider you covered. And so you need to continue to do those challenges and not really look at the satellite as much as far as what you'd want to challenge, right? Et cetera. So we really appreciate it. And of course, if folks have additional questions with what Shubhika just mentioned, or you want her to repeat any of that on availability challenge, location challenge, et cetera, then please do speak up. Now is the time. I will also mention that I will include Shubhika in the follow-up email from today's session when we send out some of these links and some of and the recording as well. And of course, you're encouraged to contact her, as well as the broadband contact, broadband@illinois.gov, with some of these availability challenges or FCC challenge questions. And then remind us of the deadline, and I'm going to queue up another question here for you.
Sure, yeah. So the deadline that we're working towards right now is January 13th, pretty much 9 days from now. So yeah, as much as you can do, spread the word and have people participate in the process. And if there's the more the number of challenges, the more the chances of those challenges getting accepted. So we definitely would encourage individual consumers to participate in the process.
Thank you. Question on when is it appropriate to ask the state to include location challenges in the state challenge if you're a county level official?
So that would be if you have information or if you have identified locations that you'd like to challenge for the fabric, definitely reach out to us at the email broadband@illinois.gov, and the challenge window is open. The fabric is going to be updated by the FCC and by CostWest periodically for every 6 months. So definitely any data that you have about missing locations or just corrections with locations, send it out to us. And as soon as we have it in a format that is acceptable and required by the FCC, we can make that submission. And if the particular county or organization is interested in registering themselves with the FCC and making challenges on their own, we can help out and guide you through that process as well.
Okay, we have another concern about really needing a resource that can provide a step-by-step process for some of these challenges. So do you think one or more of the links that we provide in the follow-up is going to really be a resource in that way, that kind of show the iterations for the different cases that might be being faced in localities?
Yes, I think the videos are a good resource, and as I'd mentioned on the Illinois Office of Broadband website under resources, we also have put together the step-by-step guide, which has screenshots for the process and also a little more context on the kind of information that can be provided under each of these different boxes for information that we have on the form. So these are out there can be helpful, but if there are more specific questions for like, specific addresses or issues that people might be facing, again, an email to us. We're pretty responsive. You can get a quick response, and we can, guide you with your individual query as well.
Okay, so I'm going to put that link in the chat, and you should just let me know if that's the correct link for the resources you're describing, or if there's something more specific, and I can get that also into the chat. And then I'll move on to this next concern here. Question about this challenge is, and you can kind of refer to it as well. It's in the chat. The timestamp is 12:34. Does DCO know of any providers who are challenging the Fabric map outputs extrapolated from providers' own data inputs into the Fabric's black box? I'm asking that question directly from the person, and I'm not quite sure what I'm asking, but maybe you know exactly what that means.
Sure. I am not really aware of providers challenging their own data or the Fabric, but I know is Matt on, and if he has any information on any providers or participating in the Fabric challenge.
Let me put him up to co-host, which is, all right. Yeah, he should be able to unmute if he would like to say anything.
Thanks, Nancy, and great job, Shubhika. Really nice job today. I think there's a couple of points here that I just wanted to emphasize real quick. This last question that Nancy raised, there are some providers that we've just noticed a difference of behavior over the last 6 months in terms of the data that's being provided to the state, and that's reflected in the broadband map at the FCC. And so I would expect a number of providers to be active in challenging the challenge, so to speak, in pushing back. And so that's why I think it's really important for us to just consider kind of a multi-pronged approach to getting the best broadband map possible. And before I move on, I just want to thank any providers listening. We love the fact that you're helping drive network access out to as many Illinoisans as possible, but there's a big chunk of our state that is still unserved or underserved, and we want to work together to make sure we fill in that gap. And so the starting point is making sure that we're talking about the same data and make sure that the mapping is as accurate as possible. And so I would just say, if you're a consumer or if you're a local community and you're participating in the FCC's challenge process, great. But also make sure that you let us know at the Office of Broadband of your concerns too. And what we're planning to do moving forward is to look at the FCC broadband map and help perfect it, but also to continue to invest in our own state-driven mapping. And for the past decade or so, states have really had to take this upon themselves if they wanted anything close to an accurate broadband map. And so we have the Illinois broadband map that we can toss that link in the chat as well. And the data that we've collected, very similar to what the FCC is reporting on its broadband map. And I just want to emphasize to folks, if you're having any frustrations with the FCC challenge process, I can tell you I have a number of them. The fact that it's all happening over the holidays here is 1, 2, and 3. But the point is, we want to continue this conversation well beyond the January 13th deadline. We want to hear from folks around the state if you're having any issues with the FCC broadband map or with our own Illinois broadband map that's being shared on the screen right now. And to that end, fear not. If the FCC map is not accurate, but our Illinois broadband map is accurate, we're going to have the flexibility to use state and federal dollars to drive out network expansion to areas that we know here in Illinois are unserved or underserved. And so I think the point here is we've got a couple of different processes happening here at the same time. The FCC mapping process, which is really important because there's federal dollars on the line. And also we want to help the FCC perfect its map. But as a backstop, we have our own investment in state-driven mapping that will be allowed to help us drive investment in the years ahead. And so I would just say lean into the FCC mapping process right now and get as much good data as we possibly can from the individual consumer level, from the community level, provide the state with any information you have, and we'd be happy to try to weave it into our bulk challenge. But then beyond that, stay engaged, get more and more folks in your communities engaged, including your neighbors. 5-10 people in a subdivision can really help drive investment. And then we're going to be very mindful as we put together our 5-year action plan and work in outreach and engagement around the state in the coming year of taking your experiences into account as we put together our planning and make our investments. Long-winded way of saying there's a lot of opportunities here for you to register your concerns with mapping.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt.
That's why they kept me on mute, because you get me talking broadband, I go on and on. But Nancy, Shubhika, everybody, great discussion here so far.
Thank you, Shubhika. To be fair, the next person in line here has a pretty specific question. And you might want to also reiterate what types of broadband we're talking about, or what types of what we are talking about when we refer to the FCC's definition of served and also infrastructure. So for example, you had mentioned wired and fixed wireless, right? So we have a question about the availability and coverage here, about an entry that is being referenced on a Illinois.gov site in regards to network availability. Don't know if you see that in the comments there. It's got a 1244 timestamp, and was hoping you could maybe provide some clarity there on what types of data we're looking to make challenges for. Yes, good. Yep. Yeah.
So what exactly are we? The last entry is mainly for, let me see, we have radio data.
You know, and maybe we can make a note and say, you know, here's Shubhika's address, and maybe move this to an offline conversation as well, since it's a little bit specific, and move on as well. So here's the next question, and we have just a few more. I'm a school superintendent at our county's at our county, and the state's 100% coverage. Okay, but as you zoom into our rural areas and click on households, the options available are only satellite options, and no one uses those because they can't afford the service, or it's very poor. And they can't afford cell phones or another service. Our area is poorly covered by 3 different cell companies. It's upsetting that we are seen as 100% covered when the only services listed in these areas are the ones that are unaffordable, inconsistent, and poor quality. So would you like to take that, and what would you do with that? That could be really, that could take a chunk out of what a lot of people are wondering as far as the type of challenge you'd make in that case.
Yeah, I think one thing that we would like to point out here is with the FCC map, it really shows the status of the location based on the technology that is selected. So if we have any technology that's selected, that's going to include all wired, terrestrial, and also satellite, and both unlicensed and licensed fixed wireless technologies. But for the purposes of funding, as I'd mentioned earlier, it's only wired and licensed fixed wireless technology greater than or equal to 25 by 3 Mbps speeds that's going to be considered served. So in this case, if your county or community is only served by satellite providers and mobile providers, then it's not going to be considered served for the purposes of funding. It's going to be considered unserved because it does not have any wired or licensed fixed wireless providers. So definitely not something you have to worry about. You definitely want to take a look at the map, and for the program and for investment, your area is going to be considered as unserved. So just want to make that distinction on the map. This service level is based on the technology that's selected right here. And that's probably the reason why your entire county shows up as served. So when you're looking at the map, just make sure that you go onto this icon here and select all wired and licensed fixed wireless, and then look at the coverage. That's going to be considered for funding. Yes.
Thanks. So for people who might put their address in or put their locality in, and not use the filter for the technology type, we'll see all served locations, and that will be frustrating because you know that's not the case. And so you'll want to go and make sure you filter that out. Why don't you show us one more time, Shubhika, how to do that?
Sure. So that is when you go into your location, or even if you're looking at like a broader area, just go onto the settings icon here, and you can select the type of technology, and we'd want you to select all wired and licensed fixed wireless with speeds greater than equal to 25 by 3.
Yep, that's our threshold for being unserved, underserved.
Yes.
That's unserved. We don't provide a challenge for the underserved at this time, or it's just the unserved. So 25.3 is that unserved threshold. So choose wired and fixed wireless and choose 25.3 and then make your challenge, because that's what the FCC considers to be served, is above that speed. So you're going to select that speed, and then you're going to see what comes up and then make your challenges to that information. Otherwise, it'll look like everything is served, but you want to ask if it's served at that level. Is that correct? Is that correct to say it that way?
Yes, that's, so this selection right here is going to change the status. But in the drop down list here for providers and technology, that's still going to show all the different technologies, including satellite. But selecting that just makes this status more accurate for funding purposes. And if your area is only served by satellite, it would show up as unserved in this case.
Thank
so
you.
The filter really helps you get a sense of what your location is going to look like for the BEAD funding allocations.
Okay, and I see a few other questions that kind of get to the same thing. We have an address that shows available, and then it just shows that we have satellite. Again, use the filters there. And so why don't you show us one more time where you click to get back to that filter right there? I'm going to ask you to do it one more time.
Yeah, it's right
okay,
here
because we have several questions,
broadband.
so I'm just going to.
Absolutely. That's good. Yeah. So under the broadband type, again, we
there's
select
that little gear right there.
Yeah, here, and we want to select all
Perfect.
wired and licensed fixed wireless and 25 by 3. Do we have any other questions?
I don't see any other concerns. I think that was probably one of the main things. And I'll tell you what, if folks are trying this and then they see that they still are having an issue, of course, we'll have that follow-up email. And again, if you didn't sign up for today's session, you can drop that email into a direct message to me so that you're included, but you'll get the links to this session, and you'll also see a way that you can contact back Shubhika and the Office of Broadband if you have overarching concerns or even some technical difficulty.
Right.
So some takeaways, what else do we want to say to our folks here before sending them off today?
Yeah, I think what I just want to say is with the short timeline, definitely focus on outreach. And this is the first step to building more long-term collaboration, because we want to be hearing from you as we work on the 5-year plans. So definitely spread the word, and this information is going to help make the maps more accurate and help us identify those areas where we need to be diverting funding in the following years. So this might seem like a tedious process, but it can really help build those initial connections that can be leveraged throughout the process as we try and build on broadband infrastructure and services across Illinois. So
okay,
definitely work on spreading the word.
Sounds good. And we'll, of course, include a little bit about outreach in that follow-up as well. Yeah, so I do see one question that was direct message to me about outreach, and really it's an interesting idea to kind of see if you can throw those filters on to your locality before sending that out. I am not for sure, Shubhika, if you can advise on that, if you can advise on if folks should, what would be the most beneficial link to use if you're, you know, sort of blasting everybody on social media about this, or if you're, you know, putting up information at different, you know, portions of the community.
So if you want to be sending information, so you know, the link to the map would essentially be, so this link right here would be the first link that'd be helpful, so they can look up their own address. But if there's like specific information about your county or something that, or a provider that you want to share, so there are certain options here. There's the area summary, where you can go in, you can actually filter by state or county or congressional district. So maybe let's do county, and let's just say McHenry County in Illinois, for example. And then it shows up statistics. And again, right here, when you're looking this up, make sure that again, the filter selected all wired and the speeds that you want to look at. So it's dependent on the kind of information that you want to be sharing out. So this is just an example, but there's this area summary tool that you could use. And then if you want to look up information for a specific provider, then there's this provider detail tool right here. And once you do that, the link that pops up after you've made all your selections, when you share that, it's going to show up that way to whoever you're sharing it with. So it really depends on the purpose and what kind of information you want to be sharing. But the map does have capability to share information for a specific provider. So you can add providers here and just look up some information. And then you can also do that for a specific area, for an entire state, a county, a congressional district, or all of these different options here, based on whoever you want to use it for.
It's wonderful. You know, I'm going to get with you to make a really nice, concise follow-up for everybody so that we get everything sort of in the right order and collated the way we want, for sort of some of the different cases we're seeing and what people need. Really appreciate the questions today. Any last takeaways before we truly say goodbye this time? It's a Midwestern goodbye. So.
Well, Nancy, thanks again for helping us organize this. Shubhika, great job. And folks who are still on the call, just know that the Illinois Office of Broadband, our broadband lab collaboration with the university, and many other collaborators are working hard over the holidays to push the FCC maps to be as accurate as possible, and also to drive up our federal funding. And so even though you're not seeing it, there's a lot of activity happening behind the scenes, and we really look forward to ramping up the outreach and engagement with the public in the year ahead. So thank you.
Thank you.